Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the high-stakes, honestly kind of hidden mechanics of the food industry. You walk through the grocery store, you see all those finished products neatly lined up on the shelves, and it all looks so effortless. But the bridge connecting the psychological realities of what we actually want to buy to the operational mechanics of food entrepreneurship, it is an absolutely fascinating, complex maze.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 90%. Let that sink in for a second. That staggering number is the failure rate for new food products. Despite the massive investments companies pour into product design, focus groups, and consumer research, 9 out of 10 products simply do not survive their first year on the shelf. Poof, gone. It establishes this massive, undeniable risk that food entrepreneurs are facing every single day. And because of this harsh reality, companies don't just launch one product and cross their fingers. They're essentially forced to push multiple products through a really rigorous pipeline all at the same time. It's a highly calculated survival strategy.
Here is our survival guide for today. 1. The saturated market dilemma. 2. Sourcing the big idea. 3. The product development gauntlet. 4. Meet the 2026 consumer. 5. The Gen Z factor. And 6. The recipe for success.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the saturated market dilemma.
Here's the foundational reality you have to grasp about the consumer food market. Over time, a country's population size doesn't actually change that drastically. And because of that, the total consumer food market is essentially fixed in size. People are only going to eat so many meals a day, right? So companies are rarely trying to grow the overall market because mathematically they just can't. Instead, they are violently competing for a fixed slice of the pie. You aren't just trying to win a customer, you literally have to take that customer away from someone else. That is the battleground you're stepping into.
And this brilliantly illustrates how you survive that battleground. You don't just compete harder on a boring commodity like standard canned beans. Instead, you diversify. You take those standard beans and you introduce some serious flavor innovation, maybe a rich craft barbecue or a complex curry sauce. Suddenly, you've unlocked premium pricing and a completely new demographic. Then you augment it entirely. You evolve those beans into something specifically designed as, say, burger mix-ins. Now you've created a completely new product with a totally different shelf position and a significantly higher perceived value. Saturation isn't the end of growth, it's the catalyst for reinvention. Moving on to Section 2, sourcing the big idea. So how do they do it? Professional food innovators do not just sit around waiting for random lightning bolts of inspiration. They systematically capture lightning in a bottle through structured channels. It's almost like following a treasure map. They analyze existing products and pore over consumer complaints just to find out what's missing. They use creative brainstorming to catch fast-moving fads. They sample and adapt authentic dishes from various cultural influences. Think about how exploring local cuisines led to the massive global explosion of products like sriracha or gochujang. They heavily explore new ingredients and processing tech. And finally, they use rigorous market research to identify structural gaps just sitting right there on the retail shelf. But look, having an exciting idea is only half the battle. Before a single dollar of heavy funding is committed, every single concept must survive 3 baseline feasibility filters. First, market viability. Will this actually sell at a profitable margin? Second, production feasibility. Can we mass produce this with our current technology? And third, cost and legal compliance. Does this formulation meet current food legislation? Because honestly, nobody wants to fund an illegal snack. If a concept fails even one of these filters, it is cut immediately to prevent massive financial losses down the line.
Which brings us to Section 3, the product development gauntlet. Once a product is inside this gauntlet, the marketing team creates a concept brief and the development chefs cook up initial prototypes in the test kitchen. Sounds fun, right? But stage 3 is where things get truly scientific, the analytical sensory evaluation. Here, you have highly trained panels that rigorously evaluate the appearance, the odor, the taste, and the texture against incredibly strict benchmarks. It is ruthless. If it actually passes, it hits stage 4, the pilot plant. This is basically a miniature factory run to test if that perfect artisanal kitchen recipe can actually be reproduced at an industrial volume. And let me tell you, many incredible products fail right here. Let's move to and see how this builds in the second half of the gauntlet. If your idea somehow survives the pilot plant, development locks in the exact product specification. We're talking exact weights, mixing times, strict quality controls, the whole shebang. This rigorous spec allows for stage 6, extensive field testing with real consumers through group discussions and home trials. Once consumer success looks probable, they finally scale up to large-scale commercial manufacturing. And this leads to stage 8,
a cautious, staged commercial launch. Because of that 90% failure rate we talked about earlier, brands will very often start regional. They test the waters before they ever commit to going national.
Section 4. Meet the 2026 consumer.
Listen, blanket discounting? It's dead. Why? Because it just erodes brand equity over time. Welcome to Value 3.0. Today's consumers use a highly sophisticated calculus when they're pushing their carts down the aisle. They demand perceived fairness, essentially delivering more for less, but they absolutely refuse to compromise on the eating experience, their health outcomes, or their personal eco-values. Brands can't just slash prices anymore. They must now justify their pricing through total transparency and authentic, compelling storytelling.
Just look at this driver breakdown. An overwhelming 81% of consumers cite value and affordability as their primary purchasing driver heading into 2026. It completely, totally dominates the decision-making process at the shelf. Simply put, if your product doesn't nail affordability, the other 19% literally won't matter. But here's where we hit a massive dilemma when we contrast that with their health aspirations. A striking 43% of North Americans find current retail food prices prohibitively high. They desperately want to eat healthier and be more sustainable, but economic reality is forcing them to trade down to private labels or just switch to discount formats entirely. For you as an entrepreneur, this right here's your gold mine. If you can bridge this exact gap between a consumer's health aspirations and their wallet, you are going to capture lasting, incredible loyalty.
Section 5. The Gen Z factor.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the dual expectation placed on products by younger generations today. On one side, we have visual hedonism. TikTok and Instagram are the new food discovery engines, meaning food literally has to look striking and vibrant during unboxings or recipe videos. But on the flip side, it must simultaneously deliver holistic, functional wellness. We're talking about gut-friendly fermented foods, protein-dense snacks, and functional adaptogens. Wellness is a powerful identity marker for Gen Z, and it's combined with an ethical pragmatism, like flexitarianism, where they're eating plant-forward whenever it's affordable and satisfying.
Finally, Section 6. The recipe for success. First off, we have to recognize the sheer scale of the tech-driven transformation happening right now. This broader food domain is projected to reach an astounding $10.35 trillion market value by 2035. That's trillion with a T. But notice what's actually fueling it. Technology is no longer just for operational efficiency on the factory floor. It is the primary vehicle for building consumer trust and environmental resilience. We are stepping into this wild era of exciting AI-driven nutrition and digital hypertraceability, where a consumer can verify a product's sustainability instantly, right from their phone.
Now, while those global trends matter, global strategies mean absolutely nothing if you don't adapt to strict local nuances. Let's take the Malaysian market as a perfect case study. Halal certification isn't just a niche there, it is an absolute baseline requirement from day one of development. On top of that, urban traffic congestion drives a massive demand for highly resilient, ready-to-eat meals. And those sensory panels we talked about, they must reflect the target community's multi-ethnicity. A flavor profile that a Chinese-Malaysian palate absolutely loves might require total reformulation for Malay or Indian Malaysian consumers. Local nuance is everything.
So the crucial point is this. Your operational playbook comes down to these 5 non-negotiables. You must embrace Value 3.0 by offering accessible indulgence, not just cheap race-to-the-bottom discounts. You must clearly highlight tangible health and convenience benefits. You have to leverage technology to build absolute trust with your buyers. You must adapt to climate realities immediately. Sustainability is no longer just a nice-to-have. And you must deeply understand and localize for global cultural nuances.
Knowing that 90% of products fail, that the market space is completely finite, and that the 2026 consumer demands absolute perfection in both value and ethics, we have to ask, is your next big idea truly ready for the shelf, or is it going to join the 90%? The market is waiting for those who get it right. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. We'll see you in the next one.